मुच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Well, I'm glad to be here today, and since this is the first session of the lecture series by Speaking Tree, I will begin with an introductory class on the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is a very unique text, and it's a very unique text because for people living on the Indian subcontinent, it is a defining universal text. In India, you see what happens is that we have a commonwealth of religions. We have a whole lot of religions, and we always have a whole lot of philosophies. In fact, just like today, Silicon Valley has become the fertile ground for startup companies. India was at one time the fertile ground for startup religions. And so many religions came up in so many philosophies, although there is many things common within them. The Bhagavad Gita is the first religious text that sought to bring about a integration of the existing philosophies of the subcontinent. It defined them, and it defined what dharma is. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he has come here to re-establish the principles of dharma, because the principles of dharma have a tendency to be divided into two varieties: those which are based on renunciation and asceticism, and those which are related to activism and being involved in the world. The Bhagavad Gita is the text which for the first time brings about an integration between both. And it brings about an integration between both because it allows you to function and work within the world in the spirit of renunciation and devotion, and make your life an uninterrupted meditation upon the Lord. It does not require you to give up your home. It does not require you to give up your family. It does not require you to give up your job or profession. In fact, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita in detail, as we will be doing over a period of time, it considers the path of renunciation to be an inferior option. Sannyasas karma yogascha nihashreyasya karavubhav tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. Clearly, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that there are two paths that lead to salvation. One is the path of renouncing the world, and one which is the path of working with devotion. And between them, he says, working with devotion is superior. So in this, it differs from many other texts. And by putting the position of the householder and emphasizing the importance of dharma, he differentiates the Bhagavad Gita from all the other texts. Whereas many of the other spiritual texts have a focus on moksha, Bhagavad Gita has an emphasis on dharma. Dharma is that which holds everything together. So the world that we see around us is also dependent upon dharma. And when dharma is not practiced, the world as we see around us, the society, the family, all of them go into disintegration. And the Bhagavad Gita was very clear that it recommended the path that followed dharma first, and moksha would be a consequent result of following your dharma in a spirit of devotion and renunciation. Also, the Bhagavad Gita is unique in the sense that it differentiated atheistic philosophies from theistic philosophies. So the whole idea is that you don't follow a philosophy and become an atheist but rather you follow theism and you attain salvation. So these are the two most important points I'd like to state before I go further. One is that it is for everybody because it is meant for you to do your duty and work within the world. And the second issue which I pointed out to you is that it is about God. In fact, Bhagavad Gita means song of God. So it is very clear and emphatic in the message that it is giving. And although the Bhagavad Gita has twisted and the texts have been tortured and misinterpreted by overlaying and interposing and trying to impose different philosophies in the name of the Gita, if you read the Bhagavad Gita exactly as it is written, it is very simple and it is a very theistic book. In fact, it is the primary text of Vaishnavism. It contains many philosophical ideas that can be studied by other people, no doubt. But essentially, it is a primary text of Vaishnavism. Sometimes people call the idea of the Bhagavad Gita as being militaristic, as being for violence. And Krishna is often depicted as a person who encourages violence and encourages the battle of Kurukshetra. Well, you should understand that the Bhagavad Gita does not stand alone. The Bhagavad Gita is part of the entire, just one part of the entire text which is known as Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, it is very clearly described how Krishna tries to avert the war and how he seeks peace, giving innumerable concessions, even asking Duryodhan for just one village for each of the Pandavas. Forget about half the kingdom. And when Duryodhan says that he will not give even as much land as there is on the head of a pin, and that his intent is to destroy the Pandavas completely, then there is absolutely no choice. And the fight, the battle of Kurukshetra, is actually one that is of last resort, not the first option. So Bhagavad Gita does not promote violence, but it does not shy away from violence. As a surgeon, I must tell you that there is a good reason why surgeons perform what they call as surgical violence. And now you're probably aware of what is called a surgical strike. So similarly, it is very important to understand that violence is not to be condemned completely. We want to avoid violence wherever possible. And only when there is no other option, when we are forced to take a path where you have no choice but to fight or die, then violence is necessary for the Kshatriya, for the one who is equipped to battle. And for a soldier to leave the battlefield, for a soldier to give up war, is in fact one of the biggest crimes, because the Bhagavad Gita points out the importance of doing your duty, of doing what is called your Swadharma. And therefore, you should understand, while the Bhagavad Gita does not promote violence, it does not shy away from violence, it has a very realistic approach to life, and it essentially points out the importance of everybody in society, including the soldier, the warrior, the policeman, to engage in violence when it becomes absolutely necessary. The Bhagavad Gita is a text which you should understand is a very unique text because it consists of a synthesis of numerous religious spiritual ideas that existed. And many of these ideas that were contradictory or opposed to one another were brought about in the Bhagavad Gita to become a synthesis and bring about a union between different philosophies and made them into one holistic, synthetic whole. To give you an example, philosophies in those days consisted of those which demanded renunciation and those which demanded that you should work in the world. And those who worked in the world were supposed to keep on working and at the time of death move on to heaven and then to a rebirth in a superior body with greater wealth and more knowledge. The renunciate said that if you do what we tell you, you will become free from the cycle of birth and death. Now, a synthesis between them was that yes, you should work in the world, but you shouldn't work in the world to get heaven or to get better birth the next time around. But you should work in the world as a meditation upon God, as the performance of your duty. And if you do that with a renunciation, internal renunciation, in fact, a complete detachment from the world while you live within it, just like the lotus leaf lies within water but yet is never wet. If you remain in the world and you perform your duties without becoming attached, then you will get the same result as the renunciate. And that result of the renunciate is to become free from the cycle of birth and death, and you will attain salvation. So, in this manner, many different disparate views were reconciled and they were brought to what is known as a syncretism, or it is called a synthesis. And in this way, the Bhagavad Gita brings about a union and a synthesis of many philosophies. And having done that, it centers all the philosophies around God. It centers all the philosophies around God. And therefore, the uniqueness of the Bhagavad Gita is that you could have, there were many questions. Is God personal or is God impersonal? Is God immanent, that is within you? Or is he transcendent? Is he beyond you? So all these questions are answered in the Bhagavad Gita. And all these questions are elaborately discussed. That it doesn't have to be either or. It includes, you can have both. And both, for example, God is both personal and God can be impersonal also. So you have an impersonal version of God and you have a personal version of God. So this is one of the areas where you find a synthesis where both were possible. Similarly, is God immanent or is he transcendent? So yes, God is immanent. He is within all of us. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is within your heart. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriday deshe arjuna tistati brahmyan sarva bhutani yantararudani maya. He is seated in your heart. He says, the Lord is seated in your heart and he is directing you onward towards your destiny. You are merely seated in a machine made of material energy. Surrender to him. Tam eva sharanam gaccha sarva bhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prapshashi shashvatam. And if you surrender unto him, he will take you towards peace, perfection, and the supreme destination. Just like this moon in the sky is reflected into multiple lamps which contain oil, and it looks like there are multiple images of the moon and multiple lamps which contain oil. Similarly, one can see that there is one Lord, but in fact that Lord is reflected in every human heart. And the concept of God, the concept of avatar, are all described in beautiful detail within the Bhagavad Gita. But the Bhagavad Gita is not about knowledge. Although it contains all the knowledge you can ever need. When speaking to Arjuna, Krishna says, once I have told you what I want to tell you, there will be nothing more to be known. So The knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita is so profound that there is nothing more to be known, both in the material and in the spiritual world, both noumenal as well as phenomenal. There is nothing else to be known once you know the Bhagavad Gita. But in addition to knowing this, it's very clear that the Bhagavad Gita is not simply a means to the acquisition of knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita is a means for self-transformation. It is for us because spirituality is not about accumulating knowledge. Spirituality is about divesting yourself of everything, including what we think is knowledge. We need to give up our hopes, our dreams, our illusions, our ideas, our ambitions, our desires, our sense of self. And only when we become free of all these things, and we need to give up rather than to acquire. So don't come to Bhagavad Gita with the idea I'm going to acquire knowledge. Yes, you will acquire a lot of knowledge, more than you will ever imagine, more than I can explain to you. But it's really a self-transformative exercise. Because if you follow the Bhagavad Gita according to the way it has been presented by Krishna, you will find that there will be major changes inside of you. Hopefully, there will be an improvement in your worldly life. You don't have to be worried that Bhagavad Gita will result in your becoming detached from the world and therefore you will become unsuccessful in your business, or that you will give up your job or profession. This is not true. You can continue in whatever you're doing. In fact, you must, because the Bhagavad Gita is all about work. Work as a means of attaining the divine is one of the unique aspects of the Bhagavad Gita. Karmanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan ma karma phala heturbhur mate sangostva karmani. You have a right to do your duty, you do not have a right to the fruit. Do not imagine yourself to be the doer of activities, nor should you be attached to inaction. So Krishna gives this as the first spiritual message. The idea is that we have to continue doing our jobs, being engaged in our profession. But indeed, we do it so that the work that we are doing becomes autotelic. That means the work that we are doing becomes a reward in itself. It's not that we need some external reward to prompt us or provoke us into acting better or doing a better job. You are doing your actions as an offering, as a devotion to God. And that in itself will give you such profound spiritual benefits that it will be a truly transformative exercise. So the Bhagavad Gita is about work, and you should not fear that it will lead to your giving up work or wearing orange robes. After all, you can see that I am not dressed in orange robes, nor is my head shaven, though God is doing a reasonable job of that from behind. So the important point I'd like to make here is that Bhagavad Gita is the seminal and the single text that the subcontinent has to offer you. And other religions coming from other parts of the world emphasize the reading of the text. So Christians know their Bible, you have Muslims who know their Quran. But the important question I want to ask is, do you know the Bhagavad Gita? If you are a resident of India and you belong to that commonwealth of religions which we call as Hinduism, then it is your duty, your absolute responsibility to learn the Bhagavad Gita and impart this message to your children and pass it down generation after generation. The Bhagavad Gita has several obstacles when you're studying Bhagavad Gita. The first is that not everybody who teaches Bhagavad Gita is really teaching the message of the Bhagavad Gita. Many of them are merely presenting their own philosophies, and using their own philosophies, they try to put it through the words of Krishna, saying that it is Bhagavad Gita. And it is very difficult for you to make out whether that is true or not, because the Bhagavad Gita is in Sanskrit. And Sanskrit is not an easy language, because you have to understand that in Sanskrit, the issue is that many words have different meanings depending upon the context in which they are used. Just like in some languages, the same word has got a different meaning depending upon the tone in which you say it. Sanskrit words have a different meaning depending upon the context in which that word is used. So a simple word like, let's say, karma could mean so many things. It could mean Vedic karmas, or your Vedic duties, or your duties as described by the Vedas in the performance of havan, yajna, fire sacrifice, etc. It could mean simply work, which is the work that you do every day in your home or in your office. Karma could also mean the eternal law of action and reaction, effort and destiny, purusharth and prarabdha, the moral consequences of your action. That's another meaning for karma. So in this way, there are many, many meanings for each Sanskrit word. Even if you take a simple word like Atma, Atma also could mean many things. In fact, if you go into the Upanishads, Atma originally started by meaning breath. And Atma can mean individual soul, it can mean Paramatma, it can mean so many things. It can mean the body. Atma sometimes is used to refer to the mind. It depends on the context in which the word Atma is used. And therefore, it is a very difficult text to follow. And it is my endeavor in these lectures to try to make the Bhagavad Gita as simple as possible, to make it easy for anybody to understand what the Bhagavad Gita is really saying. And once you begin to follow what Bhagavad Gita is really saying, and you start following by living the message of the Bhagavad Gita, you will find, and I guarantee you this, you will find transformation for the better in your life. And in fact, this is a guarantee, because I have over the years seen enough lives being transformed. And if nothing else, I can only speak for myself. My own life has been transformed by studying and trying to live the message of the Bhagavad Gita. I've been giving lectures on Bhagavad Gita now. I've been hearing Bhagavad Gita since I was 5 years old. Because when I was 5 years old, we used to have lectures on Bhagavad Gita in English in my home. With Sanskrit translation in English, I used to have Bhagavad Gita being taught in my own home at the age of 5. I can only say that is destiny. I began giving lectures on the Bhagavad Gita in 1986. And you can see that's a good number of years. And people often ask me, have you changed any lives? I said, I can only speak for myself that it has changed my life. And it is my request to you that if you take this message seriously and you take it to heart, and more important, you try to apply it in your everyday life. And you will find it very easy to apply in your everyday life, because the path that is described in the Bhagavad Gita is not meant for an ascetic. It is not meant for a renunciate. It is not meant for a yogi. You don't have to contort your body into unique postures. It does not require anything extraordinary to perform what you're doing. You just have to keep on doing what you're doing with a different consciousness. And that consciousness is the consciousness of God. It is a consciousness of Krishna. The important thing is that this is an theistic work. It's not an atheistic work. And in fact, the Bhagavad Gita says Idam na tapaskaya na bhaktaya kadachan. So this message of the Bhagavad Gita should not be given to those who are atheistical. So I do not recommend that people who have an atheistical bent of mind try to attend these lectures and learn from the Bhagavad Gita. You will not. And you may study all the versions of Bhagavad Gita that you want. But if you do not accept that the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita is Lord Krishna Bhagavan, not just a god of the 33 crore devatas that are there, but he is the supreme Lord. Unless you do that, you will not benefit from the Bhagavad Gita. Because otherwise it will be simply like reading, taking a bottle of honey and looking at the outside to see what are the contents of the bottle of honey and what the label says, but you will never get to taste the honey. Because acceptance of the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita as the Supreme Lord is most important and the primary requisite for studying Bhagavad Gita. Yes, your faith may not be strong, but you should be willing to begin with that faith. Adau Shraddha. So first you start with that faith. And your faith will be strengthened as you go along. In my journey, both internally from a spiritual perspective and also in trying to live the Bhagavad Gita, I have studied many things that do with the human mind. And I have, in fact, tried to look for parallels in neuroscience and the changes that take place within us to understand what happens to you when you engage in following the message and the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. And during my lectures, I will take the opportunity to introduce at different points the connections between neuroscience and the transformations that the Bhagavad Gita brings about. The most important of these is the importance of the transformation that Krishna speaks about, starting from the beginning of the Gita and which goes on throughout the end of the Gita. So you have the Sthita Prajna, Dukheshu Anudvigna Mana, Sukheshu Vigata Spriha, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha Sithadi Muni Uchate. One who is not depressed when there is cause for sorrow, who is not excited when there is cause for joy, who is free from attachment, fear, and anger. Such is the sage of steady wisdom. And goes on to describe the behavior of one who is a karma yogi in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Then in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhyan yogi, which attains the same objective. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahitah sitoshana sukhadukeshu tatha manatmanayo. For one who has conquered his mind, for him God is already reached. For him heat and cold, joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, they are all the same. So the objective is to attain a state of mind, whether it is the state of mind that is attained by a Sthita Prajna, by a Karma Yogi, by a person who is a Dhyan Yogi, by a person who is practicing Bhakti Yoga, whether it's a person who is Gunatita, by practicing the path of Jnana Yoga, all of them lead to the same conclusion. The conclusion is that of an evolved individual who is free from reactive emotion. All of us have experienced sorrow. All of us have experienced depression. All of us experience excitement and exaltation. But the Bhagavad Gita is about learning to become free from reactive emotion. Your emotions should be chosen by you just like a surgeon picks up the instruments that are necessary to perform a surgical operation. They should not be thrust upon you or flung upon you or burst out of you without any control. And this is the idea of emotional regulation, the ability to become free from the reactive emotions that the world keeps on provoking in you, taking you on an emotional roller coaster through life. That you should become stable, that you should become completely at peace. Don't come here seeking excitement, and don't come here seeking ecstasies. It's possible to attain all of these things, both by the use of drugs as by the use of other mental techniques to acquire ecstasies and various forms of excitement within. But the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita is not to attain ecstasy. The path of Bhagavad Gita is essentially to bring about peace, stability of mind, a peace that transcends all understanding and which makes you immune to the ups and downs that you will face within the world. Whether you're working in the best of times or whether you're working in the worst of times, whether things around you are full of life and light or whether it is the darkest of COVID times when you really feel that nothing seems to be moving. The purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to give you eternal peace, to make you Jivan Mukt. That even while you live within this body, you should attain a state of being where you will be truly free from the afflictions of the world. Some pain in the world is inevitable, but suffering is your choice. So this is the path to make you free from suffering. In truth, this world is a place of suffering. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that this world is dukkhalayam ashashvatam, place of misery where everything is temporary. He also says, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Doshanu, Darshanam. Birth, death, old age, disease, fault, misfortune, and happiness, they're all guaranteed to you. Guaranteed if you have not learnt the way, if you have not followed the path, if you have not learned to become devoted to God, and if you have not learned to transcend your sense of self. You will learn to transcend your sense of self. You will learn how to stand apart from your sense of self or your ego, and you will learn to look at things more objectively, and thus your vision will be more wise and it will be more appropriate to the occasion, not based upon the reactive impulses and patterns of the past. So your thought patterns, your speech patterns, your behavior patterns will all become not forced upon you by the past, but will entirely depend upon your choice. You will acquire a state of being where you will be, shall we say, a witness, a sakshi to what is going on. And you will be able to use your emotions when necessary and when appropriate, in the right manner, in the wise manner. And you will transform your relationships. You will be able to transform the things that are holding you back in your work and your career. These are the differences that will come about. I don't encourage you to follow Bhagavad Gita to become successful in life. There are many people who teach Bhagavad Gita for good management, Bhagavad Gita for success in the world. But Bhagavad Gita is essentially for optimizing the opportunities you have in life. The truth is, we come with a prarabdha. All of us come with a destiny. So you will attain your destiny. If you have come with aspirations of multiplying what you have already got within the world, beyond what you deserve or beyond what is destined for you, please, these lectures are not for you. But if you have come here to optimize what God has destined for you, the destiny which has been planned for you, if you want to make the best opportunities if you want to optimize all the opportunities that you will come across in your life, then yes, this is the path for you. So do this Bhagavad Gita lecture course for the primary purpose of self-transformation, for becoming free from sorrow, for becoming free from suffering, for becoming more objective in life. You will have some effect on your external life. You will be more effective, and therefore you will certainly benefit in your external life. But don't actually take up Bhagavad Gita for that reason, because then you will, because human desire is such that you are guaranteed to be frustrated. Follow the Bhagavad Gita in a spirit of renunciation. Follow this Bhagavad Gita in a spirit of devotion. Follow this Bhagavad Gita in a spirit of becoming enlightened, transformed, and liberated. May this Bhagavad Gita give you peace of mind, improvement in your relationships. May it give you optimization of all opportunities that come forth in your destiny. And thus, may you get eternal peace and become a Jivan Mukt. This is my prayer for all of you.
Om Shanti Shanti.